Okay.
Yes, that's
great.
Okay, and you can see the cover page there.
We certainly can.
Yep.
Okay, hello everybody.
Hello.
So today, hi. Oh, good waves, yes. Oh, especially that close-up one. Okay, let's see. Today I'm going to talk about the famous Minsk photos. Has the latest issue of the Echo come out?
Yes.
Just.
Well, it's just been
Oh,
delivered,
okay.
Nancy, to us personally.
Okay, I haven't received mine yet, so it might be swimming across the pond as we speak.
No, it's going to be posted next week. I only
Oh,
got
okay.
last Wednesday.
Okay, great. So we're gonna talk about this today. Probably a good idea to wait till the end for questions. So if you could just jot them down while I'm talking, and then I'll be sure to pick up anything that you want to talk about. So let's just jump right in. We have these two exhibits, D209 and D211. So the one on the left here is in Central Square in Minsk, and
So,
both
Nancy, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to maximise your PowerPoint and so you go to slideshow from the beginning? So we can't see all the running order then.
On the left.
Okay.
No.
Just give me a second.
From current slide will do it. From current slide will do it.
Is that good?
It's not doing it. Don't know why.
How do I get rid of that on the side?
Oh no, you've got it now.
Yes.
Can you see that whole slide?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, but we don't see the running order. That's
No.
You need to get rid of the running order.
It's not in.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Doesn't matter.
It's not doing.
Yeah, that should fill the screen.
Yeah, it should fill the screen.
But we can see it fine.
Okay.
Well,
Okay,
just
so
more clearly on the.
okay, so both photos were taken by Rita. The three ladies are Rita Naiman and Monica Kramer, who traveled from Solvang, California, and then Marie Hyde is the third person. So for whatever reason, the first photo that was taken was actually D211, and that was taken by Rita with Monica Kramer's camera, and Rita is not in the photograph. So here you'll see, this is the in-tourist guide whose name is Svetlana. Here is Monica Kramer. Here's the Singer automobile that we'll talk about a little bit. There's a little boy here who I understand is the son of this man with the cap. And here's Lee Harvey Oswald, and then here's the third man that was captured in this photo.
We can't see your pointer.
Oh, you can't. Okay.
You're going to the presenter mode, I think, haven't you?
Okay. And so I'll just talk from left to right. So if we hop over to the left side of the screen and look at D209, we'll see that now there's an added person on the left, and we've kind of dropped off that person on the right. But you can tell by the trees in the background at the top left that we have, in fact, moved over a little bit. We've got quite a little bit of a different point of view in this photograph. Not significant, but just enough. The little boy is just about in the same position, except now he's fully facing the back of the car. And now we have Lee Harvey Oswald again with his facial features showing. But on the very far left, that's Marie Hyde now. And note that she's wearing sunglasses, because that'll become important when we talk about what time this photo was actually taken. The in-tourist guide again, and then there's Marie Kramer. So we don't show Rita Naiman because she's taking the photographs at both instances. What caused me concern when I looked through FBI lab lists was they had 209, and again, why they numbered that ahead of the other one that they got first, I don't know. And then they have a D210 in between 211. I mean, we can tell there's a number missing between them, right? 209 to 210. So then it becomes an interesting feature of what is D210. and I cannot find what it is. When it lists it on the lab reports, it doesn't say what it is. So I'm still exploring that to determine what is at issue there. So, who are these tourists, and why are they important to us? I mean, it's just a photograph. We knew Oswald was in Minsk, so like, what's the big deal? So, here's the circumstances. They were 3 American tourists, and they were going through the Soviet Union and many other countries on their itineraries, and we'll go through that. And so they stopped in the square and they took the photograph, and later on it was determined that that looks a lot like Lee Oswald in those photographs. So after the assassination, when Lee Oswald came to a global importance, it becomes important to try to understand more about Oswald's movements in Minsk when he was in the Soviet Union. And then, although the investigators had both photographs, I can't find any record of them trying to find the other people that are in those photographs, those 2 other men and the little boy. So it brings up many questions to us. I mean, what I wonder about is, the official story that comes out from the Warren Commission is a little bit based on this background of why this incident is important. So just to remind us, Lee entered the Marine Corps. He defected in '59, and then he stayed in Moscow for about 3 months, and then he was sent on to Minsk. And so he worked in a radio factory there. And all the time that he was there, up until early or mid 1962, he was monitored by the KGB, by his fellow co-workers, people that he thought were befriending him, etc. And so he came to this global and national prominence in November '63 after the assassination. So, there were articles in the paper when he defected. His brother is shocked. There's Robert with his wife Veda and their daughter Kathy. Here's Lee in the Marine Corps. So meanwhile, while that's all happening, Marie Hyde traveled with a friend, Muriel Glasson. That name might be new to you, and we'll go into a little bit about her, and a tour group through Europe, Africa, and the Balkan countries. And she left the group in Poland and left Muriel left in Poland and went on to the Netherlands, while Marie went on to the Soviet Union. By contrast, Rita and Monica, they traveled to the British Isles because Rita was born in Leeds, and they visited family, and they traveled all over the UK and the Scandinavian countries, and then entered the Soviet Union. They arrived in Moscow within a day of each other, Marie and Rita and Monica, and they met on that August 5th at a dinner at the National Hotel where they were both staying. And so at this time, Oswald and his wife Marina, they're making plans to leave the Soviet Union and return to America. So all that writing back and forth to the embassy and writing to his mother for money and a sponsorship, all of that is going on at this time. Okay, I'm going to leave those slides on the side so that I don't mess it up.
Okay.
Okay. So Monica Kramer, she was born 1913. So there's a little bit of an age difference between these travelers. Monica is 49 at the time of the trip. She's a very educated, intelligent woman. She graduated magna cum laude from USC, which is a very prestigious Southern California college. And she's very interested in sociology and social work. So she goes to work at a welfare department, not the highest paying job in the world, but something she absolutely has a passion for. She marries a man who is from a very wealthy family. They relocate to Solvang at that time. They had been living in the Santa Barbara area. The marriage didn't last very long. During that time period, she starts a chicken ranch and a horse stables at a place that they named Sunny Acres. And it's kind of interesting that this whole Solvang area, I don't know if anyone's ever been there up near
Yes.
Santa Barbara. Anyone?
Yes.
Okay, so it's very Danish in origin and design, and it's kind of like a little hippie colony in some ways. People are very environmental conscious and very community oriented. So she is a very outspoken member of the community on the environment, on animals, women's issues, and that in the community. And she mostly traveled around the Western US before this 1961 trip. So she wasn't a global traveler like Marie Hyde was. We'll talk about her. And she dies in 2005.
Excellent.
Okay, so Rita was born in 29, which means that she was about 32 years old at the time of the trip. So you've got Monica, who's 49, and Rita's 17 years younger than she is. And I'm talking about the ages because it's going to make a difference in how these three women interact and how they look at things. So she was born in Leeds, and she immigrates to the U.S. and lives with relatives for 2 years when she's just barely 18. She kind of has a little bit of wanderlust, finding her footing about where she wants to live in the United States. She ends up in Southern California, kind of doodles around a little bit at different jobs, and finally winds up in Solvang. So because of her love of animal welfare and horsemanship, she ends up getting connected to Sunny Acres. And at that time, then she is able to meet Monica Kramer, and they find out that they have these common interests in that. They're very conservative, and again, they're very outspoken in the community. They're the kind of people that write the letters to the editor, try to start civic organizations, etc. And then, so before that trip to the Soviet Union in environs in 61, they took a week-long trip to Mexico City, and they used to go on skiing trips to Lassen Forest National Park, which is in the central California northern part. And so they used to do little local travel, and you can, their names would show up in the society columns of the local paper about, they dined at such and such place, or they visited this family, or this couple. And she died in 1997. Okay, so let's see. Okay, now can you see Meet Marie Hyde?
Meet Marie Hyde, yeah.
Okay, so she is born in 1899. So she is 61 years old at the time of the trip. Easy to remember. So now we've got an age group of someone who is 32, 49, and 61. So it's quite a gap in the ages. Her father died before she was even a year old. She had kind of a rough childhood in that, but she loved being educated, and she became very interested in furthering justice in the world and meeting people in the world. And this kind of interested me because that's what Ruth Paine always says. The way to peace is to meet different people from other countries, and don't just read about the propaganda that you get here about what things are like in other countries. But if you actually were a pen pal with people or communicated with them, you could maybe find out more information about them. And so she marries a man named Loring Hyde. And of course, that name's going to sound familiar because of Ruth Hyde Paine. And he's from Connecticut. He's from the Hyde family that came here from England, and they came into Connecticut rather than Pennsylvania, which is where a lot of the Paine and Hyde family comes through on the Paine side. they eventually end up in Port Angeles, Washington, and he is a merchant marine, so he has traveled across the oceans. He has gone to foreign lands, and he is. They are both extremely well respected in the community of Port Angeles, which is a pretty small little city at the time that they first moved there. And she is a bridge enthusiast, and I don't know if anyone knows bridge. I don't, but in kind of researching it a little bit, I discovered there's all kinds of different levels of mastership, etc., in it, and she had achieved one of the highest levels at many different varieties of bridge that are played, and so she met a lot of people that way, and she also had this interest in foreign lands and customs. And so before this trip, she had gone on several long trips, like weeks of duration through Great Britain. She'd been to Hong Kong, the San Juan Islands, and so he dies in 1975. Okay, and she relocates then down to the Coachella Valley in Southern California, and she still is pretty active. She does a lot of spontaneous types of little trips across the United States and is not afraid to drive around all by herself or anything like that. And she died in 1985. Now, this is a fourth person who, Muriel Glasson is her name. Give me a yes about anyone who had heard of her before my article.
No.
Nope, no one? You're right. So she's a little bit of an interesting figure. She is close in age to Marie Hyde, so they're contemporaries. She was born in Kansas, became a teacher, has numerous bachelor and graduate degrees from various institutions, always on scholarship, highest marks, etc. She joined the WACS during World War II. Her specialty is home economist, and it's not just about learning how to make souffles, in the kitchen and make your husband happy. It's more about teaching about food nutrition, how to bring up and raise the standards of a small village by the proper type of safety, sanitary conditions around food preparation and serving. And so that's where she finds her niche for global traveling on pretty significant stays in places like Rangoon in the former Burma. And she gets the financial support of various organizations like the U.S. Educational Foundation. She's a Fulbright scholar. She's gets funding from the Ford Foundation. And she's listed eventually in the who's who of American women. So she's a pretty important person. In 1961, she travels with Marie Hyde, and she had one trip prior to that trip with Marie to The Hague in 1958, where she's done a lot of visiting and done a lot of speeches on worldwide food nutrition. And many international organizations look to her. This picture in 1966 is when she retired from teaching after over 40 years in the teaching field, and she dies in 1992. Now, I did not interview her, but I did interview her sister, one of her sisters, so I was able to get a lot of information from her. Okay, now we're at the trip itself, the meat of things, okay? And here we have the total itinerary of the trip abroad. On the left side is what Rita and Marie did. On the right is what Marie and Muriel did. And so where the red in the middle is where they intersected, where they ended up in the Soviet Union. So Rita and Monica, they went to Liverpool and stayed with her family, Rita's family, for quite a bit of time before they traveled to London and purchased this Singer sedan. Now, the whole idea was that they would, from that point on, use the car as their transportation vehicle, and they would do all their, traveling with that. And then eventually, then when they sail to the U.S. from France, they will bring that car back home with them. And so they go all over the United Kingdom. They go through the 3 Scandinavian countries, and it's through that point after Helsinki that they end up coming through Viborg into the Soviet Union. And so your ears should have perked up at that, because that's exactly how Helsinki to Viborg into the Soviet Union to Leningrad, of how Lee Harvey Oswald came into the country too. So it's the easiest way to get into the Soviet Union compared to the southwest entry point at Poland at the city of Brest. So they after that trip is over, Rita and Monica proceed and have another 6 to 7 weeks. And you can see all the countries that they went through, some of them in the Soviet bloc and some outside of the Soviet bloc. But they were 2 women traveling alone, really having a good time and meeting some friends, seeing the sights, etc. And then they come home late September. Now, Marie and Muriel, they leave a little bit later from the United States, and you can see all the places that they visited. So they were no slouches, even though they were, much older than the other 2 women. And they traveled by car, boat, and train, and plane between all these places. So they didn't have a vehicle of their own. That they had to go on a lot of bus tours and that type of thing to see the sites that they wanted to go see. And then both of them, from both Muriel left from the Netherlands to come back, and Marie left from Amsterdam. She had prearranged to purchase a vehicle in Paris, and so when she left Monica and Rita, after they exited the Soviet Union, she went on through Poland and Austria to pick up the car and fly home and take a boat home. Okay, so that's kind of the overall view of this for you to kind of see how well traveled these 4 women were in their interactions. So now let's zero in on our piece of the puzzle that involved these photos. And so very specifically on the left side, how Rita and Monica came in by car. And you can start to see these driving distance about how far they are between cities. And you could usually only go about 40 miles an hour, the speed limits between 30 and 40. And so these were long trips between cities. They pre-purchased the trip package in London before they left, and so they had to be in Viborg on 7:31. They had to be in Leningrad that night. They had to get to Moscow by 8:04. So they couldn't just do serendipity and say, "Oh, that looks like a nice little road. I think I'll take it and see where it leads me." They had to stay on the highway, and they had coupons and tickets for exactly what hotels they would stay at, etc., along the way. So they might be able to stop and have a little lunch and pit stops and those type of things. But when you've got to drive like between Novgorod and Kalinin and get 350 miles on the odometer, you really got to haul. And so they were taking pictures along the way, and at least one of those pictures that became the subject of the camera's eye turned out to be D209, as identified in the FBI lab. So you can see they spent a few nights in these different places. Meanwhile, Marie she had been in Warsaw, Poland, and that's where she and Muriel had split. So now we kind of forget about Muriel because she's doing other things, and it's well documented where she was during this Soviet period. So we know she was not in the Soviet Union at any time with them. You know, the pictures just bring up a myriad of questions that start to get answered as you start to look at this trip that these ladies actually took, you know, based on the official story. So she came in through Brest from Poland by train, and that was a normal exit entry point coming in through what is now Ukraine, and came through that point. So then she continued on the train. She had a 2-hour stop in Minsk. So of course I was intensely curious. Did she get off the train and go to Central Square herself? What did she do during this 2-hour stop? Well, she was pretty much monopolized by the In-Tourist Guide the whole time. And you know, the internet today helps you figure out distances between places. So the distance from the train station to the Minsk Central Square, and being there and coming back and getting there in time for the meal that she had with the In-Tourist Guide, etc., it doesn't fit the scenario. So I doubt very much that during that 2-hour stopover she went to the Central Square, even if someone unknown picked her up in a car and took her there. Then on to Smolensk, and then into Moscow. Okay. One thing to know is that Marie Kramer always went first class. Okay. Whereas Monica and Rita had the car and they just went. And so Monica makes a point of always mentioning how she goes first class so she meets a certain caliber of people, even when she's abroad and that. So, you know, when you read her notes about the trip, she talks about the people that she meets from the different countries, and she's very snobbish with them and even very anti-Semitic. When she's in Jordan prior to the Soviet Union, she describes how what a difference there is between Jordan and Israel, and how the Jordanian side of Jerusalem at that time is so clean and proper and everything, but the Israeli side of Jerusalem is just like slums and everything. And so she has very strong opinions of the people that she meets, but I think they're also based on some preconceived prejudices that she has. So finally here, middle of the page, with the arrows, the three ladies meet over dinner at the Hotel National. That hotel is usually the place that In-Tourist would set up American or foreign travelers. So I guess it was, you know, easier to keep tabs on them all at one hotel rather than them spreading them across the city in Moscow. But they had originally been, Marie had been scheduled to stay at the Hotel Ukraine. And when she got off the train in Moscow and was met by the In-Tourist Guide, she was said, no, you're going to be going to the Hotel National instead. It's better and all of that. And so she describes this room that she had on like the 3rd or 4th floor that was facing the front of the building. So it faced directly into Red Square. So she saw the whole Kremlin. She could see everything there. And it was like a giant suite. So she said, at first I thought they had the wrong person because they gave me this tremendous suite. They were just constantly checking on me to see if I had everything I needed. Well, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that that suite was probably bugged and cameraed, and they were checking on her all the time so they would know what in the world she was doing every day. Then they meet. And so then over these next few days, here's what happens in their time in Russia. At the Moscow Film Festival, that will become important to us when we talk about Anthony Summers and his conversation with Rita Neyman in 1979, where she talks about seeing Oswald for the first time. A couple of days of normal tourist types of thing, going to the gum department store, GUM, the big nationalized department store. And then on the 9th, they watched the Titov parade together from Marie's giant suite, because although they're in the same hotel, they are in the back side of the hotel, which faces the parking lot and faces away from the Kremlin. So, and then they drive a whopping 400 miles to get to Smolensk, stay there that night, and then head on to Minsk the next day. And that's our important date of August 10th, to actually be there and go to Central Square. Okay, so this is August of 1961, right? That they went on this trip. And in 1962, between the time they return in September of 61 and say about March of 62, Marie and Muriel up in Port Angeles and Rita and Monica down in Solvang are speaking to women's groups all the time. There's probably about a dozen times that they speak. They show their slides. Rita also had the 8mm camera that had several reels of those little 50-foot ones that you used to buy back in the day, and would show film of their travels, and then talk through the slides that they took. So this one interview that was published in the more local Solvang newspaper got picked up by the Santa Barbara press. And that's how that got on the radar of the CIA. Although I'm not sure that there wasn't some connection with the passport office in the Department of State when people apply for passports, and then they plan their itinerary. And on those applications, you have to say what countries you plan on visiting. It seems to me that would be a logical flow of information from the DOS to the CIA to keep them apprised of people's foreign travel. But this didn't become to a head until this got in the Santa Barbara News. And one of the ways the CIA finds out people to debrief on foreign travel is through the academic societies, through scientific communities, and through how those are brought about possibly in the press. So this would have been a logical way for the Los Angeles office to pick up on this travel by these two ladies, Rita and Monica. So the contact division with a specific case officer, this Mina Volny, is sent up to Solvang to debrief these two women. Now, both women say they were never contacted by the CIA prior to the trip or during the trip, that the one and only time they had anything to do with the CIA was at this March of 1962 period. And they specifically knew it was the CIA. They didn't come up under any other pretext and interview them. But through the course of that debriefing, they find out about the film and the slides, and Rita and Monica actually show them in their living room at Sunny Acres, the home that they're sharing, that these are the evidence of their trip that they brought back. And they tell them that, there was a third traveler with them, but there's nothing in the CIA documents that says who that person was, which is a pretty bad debriefer as far as I'm concerned, that Mina did not say, and who was that person, right? Because that would be a very logical question to ask to try to close the loop on the whole event. But they do know that there was a third person. And the records show that they placed 5 copies of the slides into their Russia graphics division. Now, they took 160 slides of their entire trip Rita and Monica, and 7 of those slides were from Minsk. When they did a listing of the 2 cartridges. There were 2 cartridges with 80 slides in each one. And so after the trip, they gave after the debriefing, they gave the slides and the film to the CIA and said they could use them, but they wanted them back. And so they got him back, and the CIA document said that out of everything, the only thing that was of interest was 5 slides. Okay, so that's their story on that. Now, in '64, after the assassination, they were asked. This is a copy of a CIA summary document on what they documented, how it came to pass that they found this photograph in the graphics division of the CIA files at HQ. So this is to remind us of the photo that was captured, and this is D211. So this is the first photo that was taken. So this is with Monica Kramer's camera. Okay, this is the photo that they found because they didn't know about Marie Hyde yet at that time. So they found this photo and thought this guy looked like Oswald, pulled it out, made big, huge 8x10 copies to display the features. So they asked Marina Oswald, and she says, yeah, she thinks that's him. It looks like you see the right-hand top corner. It looks like his stance, his facial features, and shirt, right? And so, but when they first talked to her on 4/27, she knows nothing of the event. No, I never heard of this. I never heard about a meeting of Americans, blah, blah, blah. But by 5/4, just a little over a week later, now she suddenly recalls this shopping trip that he went on for groceries. And when he came home, he mentioned that he had run into some Americans and that they thought that he spoke very good English. Well, given that he was native-born American, that shouldn't have been a big surprise. Then the FBI, of course, has all those exhibits from the Dallas Police Department that were taken out of the Payne garage. And 2 of those were these pictures of Oswald in Minsk. And lo and behold, he's wearing the shirt. And so it was through that they were able to convince themselves that there was, in fact, Lee Harvey Oswald in the photo, etc. But, all of this happened long after Oswald was dead. It was a question they never could pose to him while he was in custody for those couple of days in November of '63. But this is kind of starts to link all of this part together for us. So then, of course, we have the Warren Commission. This is the official version, just to remind us of the fairy tale of the time, okay? This is what they concluded. But before they concluded this, there was a little cat and mouse game happening between the FBI and the CIA before they revealed formally the existence of the photo to the Warren Commission. And so, Hoover wanted to get credit for it. The CIA wanted to get credit for it. So but the CIA sent the FBI off to interview Rita and Monica about the photo, and it was there that they discovered then the name of the other person, Marie Hyde, because Monica had kept in touch with her through Christmas cards. So she had an address for her in Port Angeles, etc., and that's what led them to be able to go to Port Angeles and interview Marie Hyde. It was through that means that eventually they got the picture of the 3 tourists that had visited, but they didn't have that much interest in Marie Hyde or her background, etc. And look, I went to, decades ago, I went to Port Angeles, and I went through the archives of the local newspaper that had changed hands, but they still had all the old stuff. And I went through papers and I found all these articles that Marie Hyde had sent in dispatches while she was on this trip in 1961 about, oh, here's what's happening in, Czechoslovakia. Here's what's happening in Poland. Here's what's happening in the Holy Land. And they would print these in the newspaper as like a human interest story. And of course, when they got back, they had a big spread, a front page below the fold with a photo of the two of them, and Monica's wearing a hat that she bought in Finland, and they're talking a lot about the Soviet Union portion of the trip, and so it wasn't hard to find out information. This is pre-internet. Archives weren't on the internet at that time, like through newspapers.com or anything, so it was kind of peeling through the stacks and finding this information. But it did give me a more well-rounded view of Marie Hyde and how she was viewed in the community, and how she got if she had opinions, they got placed in the newspaper. So, the official version becomes that the 3 tourists visited, and that Marie Hyde had become separated from her tour group in Moscow, where she met these tourists. And they don't even act like that's unusual. So think about that for a minute at the time. If all that they were told was that she got separated, how in-tourists guarded people from foreign lands when they were in the Soviet Union or Soviet bloc countries. And so they knew where you were, they knew where you went to dinner, who you were seeing, who you ran into, etc. And they kept a record of that, and if you got out of line, they went after you. It's not like you can just travel anywhere you wanted, anytime you wanted. They needed to know, you needed to be under their thumb, and but writing it that way, that she got separated without any explanation, it raises a lot of flags. But as I investigated it, I found it not so unusual afterwards. When she was in Poland and Muriel was leaving to go to the Netherlands, Marie had decided that she was going to hook up with a tour group that was coming from London that was headed to the Soviet Union for 10 days. But when she got to Poland, she found out that they were delayed in London for some reason, and they weren't going to be able to get to her spot for 2 to 3 days. So she was offered the chance to go into the Soviet Union earlier. And so now it's not so crazy that she got separated from her tour group. When I've read that, years and years and years ago, I could just see her wandering around, getting left behind at a museum or something in Moscow. And it wasn't anything like that at all. It was, she knew she was not going to be with that tour group, and she was going to try to hook up with them again a few days later in London, in Moscow, when they finally got there. So this is part of how, when they write something like this, it can lead us to 1,000 questions. And it turns out it's a little more benign than what we might tend to believe. They traveled by car from Moscow to Poland, and on that 800-mile trip, they visited Minsk in that city, and the car attracted so much attention, and the stickers on it, etc. And so every time they stopped, they said people would approach the car and talk to them about, oh, where did it come from? Do you own it? Are you traveling alone? Blah, 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 etc. Because that was very, very different for them. So two pictures were snapped, because by this time they know about Marie Hyde, and they have D209 and D211. So after the assassination, that same photo surfaced, and this led to the investigation to 2 of the tourists, Rita Neyman and Monica Kramer. Interviews with them in '64 revealed a second photo and the 3rd traveling companion, Marie Hyde. That last little bit. So this basically ended the FBI and CIA and Warren Commission investigation of the incident. Done deal for them. Okay, let's see. We're doing on time. Okay, we're doing well. Then we jump to 1978. And this is very, very disappointing because the most important thing that the House Select Committee was interested in was there evidence of a dual filing system in the CIA, supported by the existence of these photos. So they didn't spend much time about why it was, how the photos happened, how these women met, what they did in Moscow, what they did in Minsk, etc. They were all about, with Betsy Wolf leading the charge, about determining if there could have been knowledge of Oswald prior to the assassination because of the existence of this photo in the graphics division files. They concluded that it was not strange or odd or suspicious at all, that that it was a particular chain of events that occurred that were perfectly logical, and that the photograph had not been in Oswald's 201 file. Of course, the question would be, which 201 file, right? Because there's the Lee Harvey Oswald, there's the Harvey Lee Oswald, there's the Henry, all these different versions, right? And so they felt that the photograph was stored in the appropriate section of the graphics file until it was discovered in the file review that was requested on the Minsk area during the Warren Commission examination. So that this we got out of the HSCA on the Minsk photo, which is really not much of anything. But Betsy Wolf got access to CIA files, and she made notes, extensive notes of what was in those CIA files about that debriefing that happened in 1962. And so that was very good, because when the CIA later did a summary, they left out a lot. But Betsy Wolf, when her notes got declassified after the JFK Act, we can see much more detail in exactly what the ladies' interaction with Oswald included. Okay, so then the next year, Anthony Summers interviews Rita Neyman, and she hits him with the time bomb that she had 2 encounters with Lee Harvey Oswald in the Soviet Union. So she said first was at that Moscow Film Festival. When they came out of it, they were taken to by an in-tourist guide to the tail end of the festival, to the cinema, to see a couple of films. When they exited, they were approached by a man, and he was very friendly, and they could tell he was American, etc. Didn't say his name, but the in-tourist guide made them move along so that they couldn't spend very much time with him. When they got to Central Square in Minsk and these men came walking up, Rita says she immediately knew that that was the same man that she had seen in Moscow. And she thought, isn't that strange, right? But they had a brief conversation, and she said it was about very innocuous things. Now, to me, I think it would have been a different kind of a conversation than that if she had truly seen him a few days before in Moscow, and now she's in Minsk and he's in Minsk, given that travel in the Soviet Union is very organized and planned. Okay. So the next, that should be January 1980, Summers publishes Conspiracy. And that's the first time that we hear about this, this first sighting pre-Minsk photo. So when I asked her, why didn't you tell the FBI about this Moscow sighting of Oswald? And it was the classic, no one asked me. She said she answered the questions that she was asked, but no one asked her if she had ever met him before. So that was her explanation for that. Okay, now here, remember I said that there were 5 slides that they made copies of and put into the CIA graphics file. Here's a document showing that they were accessioned, which means that they were added to the photographic collection of the graphics register. But when this is a 1992 FOIA request from Rita Neyman asking for her slide back and the 8x10 enlargements that had been shown to her. She claims she never got them back. So this says that there were 2 slides in the file, and that would be D211 and D209. And so what happened to the other slides, other 4 slides out of the Naaman Kramer register that they gave in 1962? And so we don't know what those photos represented, because when I talked to Rita Naaman in 1989, she no longer had the slides at that point. So I couldn't. I wanted to be shown those. I wanted to see the film, et cetera, and everything, but I did not have that opportunity. Okay. And so my ongoing research in this is that the CIA name checks on Loring and Marie Hyde are pretty dismal in terms of, by the time it got to 1978, they were looking for a very different variation of the name. And so it was no wonder that they couldn't find anything. Plus, he had already passed away. So they couldn't find him. She had relocated away from Port Angeles, and so they didn't have any idea where she was. So they didn't talk to her at all in 1978. Port Angeles comes up several times in the research. It's a very conservative versus liberal community. Later on, the Black Panther Party had a very strong political organization there. Given how conservative that city is, that's just incredibly odd. And then Larry Crawford with Ruby. His family background is all over Port Angeles, of him coming back and forth between carnivals and wives and children and everything else back and forth there. I have to dig into more of that and find out what connectivity there might be. And then this next bullet, the summer '63 visit of the Glass family. One relative of Loring Hyde, it's a niece through marriage, lives in Irving at this time of 1963, about less than 2 miles from the home address of Ruth Payne. So I have to dig into more of that because the family was in close contact with the Glass family living there, and so that's very much on my playing field here. Lee's letters from Minsk to his mother and his brother, I have to pursue those more. David Lifton was doing a real analysis of those letters for codes and what Lee was trying to communicate to the authorities. And his supposition was that Lee was not really writing to them. He was writing because he knew they would be read by the CIA in the intercept program, and he was communicating to them. And so when he was asking innocuous questions of Robert, like, do you think that I will be prosecuted for having defected? He's really asking his handlers at the CIA, am I going to come back and face jail time? Because Robert wouldn't have any clue about it and different things. And so I have to go back to those letters and see if there's mentions of meeting an American, anything like that could be symbolized in those letters. And then continue my digging in the Hyde ancestry for overlaps with the Paynes, and also Henry and Marie Wade with the OSS, Hyde with the OSS in World War II, Operation Penny Farthing, and recruiting of spies and that they were involved in. And then this whole issue of the CIA use of educated females traveling without men around the globe, perfect cover for them to secure all kinds of information. It may just be information gathering, but whether or not they do any type of agitation or work like that in communities that they visit, that's to be determined. So those are the ongoing areas. So that wraps it up in a nutshell. More detail in the article, but this gives you an overview. So, any thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a question from the floor. 1 second.
Yeah, there was a point where the CIA lost contact with Oswald when he was in Russia. Do you think that these women could have been there to sort of get in contact with him?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that question.
The three women were there with Oswald in Minsk.
Yes.
Do you think they were sent there to actually get in touch with Oswald?
Do I think they were? Do I see evidence of that?
Yeah, because they'd lost. I heard somewhere where they'd lost contact with him for a while, maybe a year or so. I don't know.
Well, a few years ago when we got those transcripts of the bugging that was in Oswald's apartment, and we got privy to all these very private conversations between Lee and Marina, right? So on the day that this happened, they actually had a transcript in there. And what they are talking about is a fight about going to America and whether or not Marina wanted to do that. But absolutely nothing that points to that this event happened. Okay. And so we don't have any evidence there. In his historic diary, he writes about August as a lump month. So he doesn't have specific dates that we can pin down in the historic diary. Other than that, he says he's in Minsk, okay, which means that he couldn't have been in Moscow to see Rita that first early period when they came to Moscow, according to the diary. Okay, so the question is, it's not an easy question to answer, because does one believe that the CIA sent Oswald to Russia as, a double, triple, quadruple agent type of scenario? And if so, then that leads you to a path of maybe these ladies were trying to make a contact with him on behest of the CIA. Okay. But if you don't think that he was a true defector and he just went there on his own and did his own thing, and he was just, kind of nutso with doing that, and then got disenchanted and came home, then you could look at their visit in a more benign way.
I think it was part of some kind of scheme from America to get people into Russia to just find out information about the way that they lived and anything really, just find information.
Well, that's right. I mean, when you read about
detection,
Oswald, there's lots of young men that went to Russia at that time,
especially Marines.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of them, maybe 30, 40.
Well, because Oswald did a lot of play acting, it's very difficult for me to separate where I think he was sincere in his speech, actions, and thoughts versus when he was playing his chameleon game, right? So when he got back to Dallas, and there were no reporters there at the airport, remember, he's like, well, where's the press? And Robert said, well, I'm surprised you're saying that, because I thought you didn't want to see anybody or whatever. Can you give me back control of my, and then I can see you and you can see me.
Here we go. Yep.
Okay, there we go. So I think that that you have to have an opinion about Oswald and what he represents in order to in order to, determine the CIA connectivity to these ladies. Because even if Mina Volme down in Los Angeles wasn't the person that was, that might have met with them before and said, hey, look for this, look for that, etc., and even specifically pointed them to Oswald, I'm not finding any thread of that anywhere. And, when I talked to Rita, I really tried to see how savvy she was about the CIA. And she was actually pretty naive about what she thought a congressman could do versus, what they really do. Different facets of the government. And maybe that was because she wasn't raised here. I don't know. So she'd be more familiar with the British form. But she had lived here long enough that she should have been much more well versed in it. And that, if that helps at all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Nancy.